Hello and welcome to today's Digital Dealer webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by vAuto and it's titled From Digital to Delivery, 4 Keys to Close New Vehicle Buyers. Today's webinar presenter is Brian Finkelmeyer, Director of Conquest Business Development at vAuto. The webinar will run approximately 1 hour with a question and answer session at the end. Please help me welcome Brian Finkelmeyer.
Great. Thank you, Santos, and thank you, Digital Dealer, for hosting today's webinar. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the new car business today. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, I think it comes as no surprise to any of us that we're increasingly living in a digital age. You know, last week I think it was the Amazon purchase of Whole Foods, you know, suggesting that we're probably going to have our groceries delivered to our front door in the not too distant future. But consumers are increasingly you know, spending more and more time online in all the various facets of their life, specifically when they're out making big purchase decisions like houses or new cars or electronics or what have you. And I think one thing that's sort of interesting to me is that when we look at the dealers and how they're allocating their ad budgets, you know, this is based on NADA data from last year, only about a third of the dealer's ad budget is being allocated towards online or digital advertising, which actually represented about a 22% increase from what we saw the previous year. And so this particular pie chart represents, you know, about $500,000 as sort of the average annual spend. And dealers today are spending about $170,000, give or take, on digital. And so I recently just saw this infographic which sort of depicts that, you know, today's average U.S. Consumer is spending about, you know, 48% of their time that they're spending on media each day is being spent online. Meanwhile, on that previous slide, you guys remember, it's only about a third of the dealer's ad budget is being allocated towards sort of digital advertising efforts. And so when we look out into the future, this is a forecast that was done that's suggesting that we're going to continue to see, you know, pretty significant increases in dealers' digital ad efforts and the amount of resources they're putting behind those efforts. You know, when we think about it, yesterday's shopper was really sort of looking for a dealer to buy a car, and I believe that today's shopper is really looking for a car to find a dealer. And I guess it's no surprise to anybody on this call that, you know, the average consumer today is visiting over 10 websites trying to identify what car they want and what dealer they're going to purchase it from. And then, you know, we're only seeing physical visits to 1.6 dealerships. And really, you know, back in the day, the dealership kind of served as a place that customers went to gain information, whereas today it's increasingly becoming more just a point of delivery. One interesting stat I came across recently was that 77% of today's new car buyers are purchasing the vehicle they intended to buy once they arrived at the dealership, which really sort of suggests that the vehicle selection has basically been determined by the time that customer walks on your lot. I remember, you know, 10, 12 years ago that roughly 70% of all internet leads were actually customers that purchased something other than what they had sent the lead on. And when we look at the stat here today, increasingly customers are becoming laser focused on the exact vehicle that they want to take delivery of. And so I guess it's no surprise that, you know, 65% of the showroom traffic that we see, customers that visit our lot, they do so without any sort of email lead or phone call or appointment. They're just arriving because they know that you have, you know, the right car that they're looking for, hopefully at what they believe is the right price. So I guess when we think about, you know, what does success look like in today's environment, it's really sort of a combination of having the right strategy, which I think, you know, many dealers probably need to look at that 33% and say, am I deploying my resources correctly versus what today's shopper is, where they're spending their time? And then I think, you know, even more importantly, you know, how well of a job are we doing on the execution? And I used to work at Nissan for a long time, and the CEO of Nissan had a great quote where he said that 5% of the challenge is the strategy, but 95% is the execution. And I think he's exactly right about that. And that's really what I'm going to talk about more as we move through this presentation is execution. So I believe there's really 4 keys to closing more new vehicle buyers in this increasingly digital environment we live in. And I'm going to talk today about a couple of themes: relevance, agility, accuracy, and visibility. First off, relevance. The top two activities that shoppers are doing online is they're looking for the right car and the right price. And I think that's really almost becomes the definition of what is relevance. And if you're doing a good job on those two key factors, that becomes really key drivers of dealership selection, of where customers are ending up, where they go in terms of buying their car. And what I want to show you here is sort of an example of a dealer that's sort of halfway home. We've got an example here is a 2017 Nissan Rogue. And what I'd ask you to draw your attention to is in the red box, NDS stands for Market Day Supply. And what this is saying is that the overall Market Day Supply of 2017 Rogue SL in this particular market is 83 days. But combinations that are uniquely equipped like this one, which is a black with charcoal interior, actually has a unique Market Day Supply of 60. So in this particular case, this exact combination of Rogue is actually quite a bit more attractive and a faster turning combination than the overall average for Rogue. And so I would suggest that in this particular case, we've got a dealer that's absolutely got a nice piece of merchandise. But then when we look at how he's got this vehicle priced at $31,630, which is basically 100% of MSRP, and we compare that relative to how the other dealers in his market are pricing, you can see that he's kind of got the wrong price here. And based on this sort of example, I would argue that this VIN, for all intents and purposes, has become irrelevant in the eyes of today's shopper. Another example of sort of an irrelevant VIN is this particular Ultima that I found that is listed for $198,000 with roughly $170,000 in markup. And granted, this was probably a typo that was made, but I think this just calls into question, we need to do a better job of making sure that we're buttoned up on our digital advertising efforts, especially when you've got premium listings involved. And in this particular case, the dealer's paying additional money to highlight this particular car. And this just is an example that are not very difficult to find when we spend a little time out on AutoTrader or Cars.com or any of the major third-party listing sites. So I think when we talk more about relevance and how we become more relevant to our customers, I think one of the big opportunities in today's new car business is having more seamless transition between online and the offline showroom. And what I think that means is if we're depicting cars online in terms of how we're pricing them and how we're describing them, we need to certainly make sure that when the customer arrives to our showroom that there's no surprises. Surprises would include, additional dealer markup stickers, perhaps accessories that weren't disclosed on the VDP itself, those types of things. And one other big opportunity on this sort of transition of moving customers from online to offline, I think is a big opportunity that many dealers are not capitalizing today. It's just the importance of video. In fact, I was recently reading that 1 out of every 3 Americans is on YouTube at least once a month looking at automobile information. 74% of shoppers are increasingly turning to video, trying to learn more about what car they're looking to purchase. So I think this provides a big opportunity. And just even this morning, I was looking here on the local market I live in at what the YouTube presence looked like for dealers in my local market. And I didn't see a whole lot there. And so I think as we look out into the future, increasingly customers are using video, and I think this provides a really good opportunity to sort of bridge that gap between the online and offline experience that we're trying to convey to our shoppers. So let's move on to the next section, which is agility. And many brands, Nissan being a good example, which uses Memorial Day bonus cash or holiday bonus cash, to incentivize vehicles over a big weekend. And this is oftentimes an opportunity for dealers to sort of provide themselves with as much as $1,000 price advantage when you're able to be more nimble and change your prices more quickly than your competitors. And this is sort of a screenshot from our Conquest tool at vAuto, where we help automate this process for dealers so that when new bonus caches or there's changes made to incentives, you're able to quickly adjust within the same day that those are announced with very little effort, so that you are provided with sort of a, perhaps as much as a 48-hour price advantage in your marketplace, which is today's environment of, hyper-competitive metro markets, I'll certainly take every advantage I can get. Another big opportunity when I think about agility is just the ability to sort of do a better job of managing our on-ground inventory. There's a great saying one of my colleagues has, which is you can't make money on cars that show up next month, which really sort of calls into question how good of a job are we doing at managing our on-ground inventory as the month is going on. And as we all know, all of us that are on this call, the dealer trades play a pretty big role in our monthly sales performance in terms of both outbound and inbound dealer trades. And I think often it's the case where those decisions are made, in something less than 2 minutes without a proper investigation of understanding that in this particular case, the black Equinox has a 27 market day supply, while basically a very similarly equipped vehicle in red has 113 market day supply. So those types of insights can certainly help you in more ways than one. And one other point that I'd like to make on this is that it's critical that you are looking at your VINs in a more granular level like this, because it has a big implications on the amount of traffic you're driving to your listings as well as your website. So the next section I'm going to move through is accuracy. And I pulled from AutoTrader what were the most common content features that customers were searching out on AutoTrader. And these are just the biggest 6 or 7. Leather was number 1. I think last month there was something like 275,000 customers on AutoTrader that specifically said, I'm only looking for vehicles that have leather, and then heated seats, sunroof, navigation, etc. And so it's just very, very important that you are taking the time to describe your vehicles with all the appropriate equipment that vehicle has, because today's shopper oftentimes is looking for these things. And if we're not depicting our vehicles correctly, we're actually losing opportunities. And this next example I want to show you, I live outside of Nashville, and I did a search on a Ford Fusion sedan up to 28,000, and the only feature that I requested was sunroof. And you can see there that AutoTrader said that there were 7 matches back to what I was filtering for. But then when I went back in our system, I found that there was actually 82 vehicles within that 50-mile radius that met that description, which just suggests to me that there's really, really big miss at many dealerships in terms of how good of a job we're doing on describing our new cars. And I think many of you have proven that, that works pretty well on the used car side of the business, and something we can do a better job of on the new car side. One example I want to sort of highlight is a Lexus dealer who actually does a particularly good job of describing his vehicles in great detail. And as you can see there, he's calling out navigation, nav, as well as GPS. So he's sort of casting his net to capture any of those filters that the customer might use in their shopping. And then, kind of juxtapositioned against the dealer below that has the exact same car. And he's talking about providing, their passion with a world-class ownership experience. And I guess it seems slightly disingenuous to me that, in this particular case, the dealer's using stock photos and has his car basically priced at full sticker. I'm not sure that that's exactly getting off to the right foot in terms of providing that world-class ownership experience. So I think those first 20 words are critical in your descriptions, because those are being captured on the SRP on the big search websites. And the better attention that we pay to how we're describing our cars is going to help us get much, much bigger bang for our invested dollar there on those third-party listing sites. The next section I'm going to cover is visibility. And I think if we ask the average dealer what do we see here, he'd say, well, I see 3 different Nissan Rogues. But when we drill into this a little bit deeper and sort of use that more granular perspective that I was talking about, what we see here is something kind of interesting. The Nissan Rogue SV in the red, the first one listed there, you can see the overall market day supply for Rogues was 74. But across the different trim combinations, you can see that there's a fair variance in terms of the day supply of those unique vehicles. So in this particular case, you can see that ruby red vehicle has a 59 market day supply. Meanwhile, the Rogue SL's got a 93, so almost 40-day difference. And what I found out that was particularly interesting to me is that I did an analysis on vehicles that had a market day supply below the model line average and those that had a market day supply above the model line average. And what I found was that those vehicles, like this first ruby red Rogue, are actually capturing 5 times more SRPs and 40% more VDPs. And so often, dealers will complain that they don't feel like they're getting the appropriate return on their investment with these large third-party listing sites. But what this particular stat is telling me is that by doing a better job of stocking the most desirable versions of these cars, you're going to get a lot bigger bang for your buck and better return on that advertising investment. So, as I stick with this theme of being more granular in how we're looking at our inventory, this is another sort of screenshot from our Conquest tool that allows you to really drill in and take a closer look at how much traffic each individual VIN in your inventory is getting. And I draw your attention to the very last vehicle there at the bottom that has 222 search results and 20 VDPs, which is actually an awful good conversion at 9%. But I think, in the example, if we pretended that this car had 222 SRPs and 0 VDPs, would certainly call into question, my digital merchandising and give me a reason to go back and look to say, am I priced correctly? Have I merchandised and described this car correctly? I recently had a Toyota dealer tell me that their oldest vehicle in inventory was a Toyota Prius. It was roughly 200 days old, and they were sort of wondering why this vehicle was not moving. And upon further investigation, what they found out was that they had just simply failed to describe that the vehicle had the tech package. And once they added that to their description, the dealer told me that that vehicle sold, I think, 5 days later. So it really is important that we pay closer attention to the activity that each of our VINs is getting. So sort of, I think in my mind that, we can spend time and attention on kind of right car, right price. That's really meaningless unless we have effective digital merchandising. And I think that does provide huge opportunities for dealers to sort of set themselves apart from many of the dealers online that are not really focused on this particular piece of the business specific to their new vehicle inventory management. So let's talk a little bit about a success story. Here locally, there's a Lexus store that has seen big improvements in both their searches as well as the number of VDPs they're collecting per month. And what's nice for me to see is that this is bleeding over and having a direct impact on their overall retail sales volume. And so far in 2017, this dealer is up 31% in new vehicle sales, while the luxury market here in Nashville is actually down 10%. And so that's just telling me that if we're doing a better job of standing out with our online vehicle merchandising, doing a better job of understanding what the fastest turning combinations are, those cars that had the lower market day supply than the overall model line average, certainly can yield more sales, which at the end of the day, that's what's paying the commission checks for most of the folks, on this call. So next steps, some things to think about as you head back to your store, sort of 4 checkpoints. I think from the relevance perspective, maybe go back and assess the average day supply by model and for the unique VINs and understand what percentage of the VINs in a particular model line at your store are above or below sort of that model line average. The second piece in sort of the agility bucket is what's being done to sort of evaluate the effectiveness of your dealer trade. The dealer trades that are on your lot, we did an analysis about a year ago, and we found that about 17% of all vehicles on dealership lots that were older than 365 days were the result of just poorly executed dealer trades. And so I guess I'd ask you, what percentage of your dealer trades are you turning in less than 30 days after you take those in on trade? And then from accuracy, why don't you take a look and grade yourself and do an honest assessment of how good of a job are you describing your vehicles accurately in terms of, I think I called out that leather and navigation and heated seats were big options that were frequently searched on AutoTrader. How many of your descriptions are including those key feature contents that customers are searching for? And then lastly, as I sort of mentioned there, the importance of paying closer attention to the online traffic that each of your VINs is getting online. I once heard if we had, 222 people walk through the showroom and we didn't get a single test drive, I'm sure probably someone's getting fired. Yet every day in our online showroom, we've got examples where there's 222 people searching for the exact merchandise that we have in stock, but we're not getting the quote-unquote test drive with the VDP. So that's another opportunity for you to take a closer look and evaluate your dealership's performance and pay closer attention to how your VINs are performing online. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap things up and open this up for questions. So I believe the folks at Digital Dealer can kind of help facilitate any Q&A that you guys might have.
Yeah, and like Brian said, we're now in the Q&A portion of the webinar. Please add any questions to the question tab to the right. Brian, I see a couple questions already coming in. First one is, are the third-party websites really worth the high cost?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think many dealers grapple with that exact question on a monthly basis when they see those bills coming in. And I think the answer to that question is that if I'm promoting premium listings like that Ultimate example for $197,000, I think the answer is pretty simple. No, it's probably not worth the high cost. But if I'm behaving more like the Lexus dealer that I described, that's accurately, depicting his cars on the internet, pricing his vehicles attractively, using real photos, those simple, basic blocking and tackling things that have proven to be so successful on the used car side of the business. Based on the results of the dealers that I've seen that are doing this, no doubt I think that the investment is certainly worth it, but it does take some effort on the part of the dealer to sort of get that appropriate return on investment.
Perfect. And we have another dealer here that would like to know what are the acronyms SRP and VDP?
Yeah, I apologize. I should have covered that. So an SRP is a search results page, which is when you log on to AutoTrader and you say, I'm looking for a 2017 Ford Fusion and hit enter, the listings, which AutoTrader provides 25 vehicles per page. I believe Cars.com provides 50 vehicles per page. That is an example of a search results page. While the VDP is the vehicle display page, which represents out of those 25 vehicles that were depicted on that AutoTrader search, which vehicle actually got clicked on. And so that's sort of, those are two sort of important metrics as we sort of evaluate how attractive our vehicles are performing, or how well our vehicles are performing online.
Perfect. And Brian's information is on the screen. If you come up with any questions after the webinar is done, please feel free to give him a call. His cell phone is 770-856-8078, or you could just email him at brian.finkelmeyer@beauto.com. Brian, we have another question here. Somebody would like to know, are there other ways to promote my VIN online?
Yeah, so I think there's plenty of opportunities. In fact, I was reading last night that Facebook is an underutilized mechanism for doing that. I think they said that only about 10% of dealers in the country are currently using Facebook for promoting their vehicles. So I'm pretty sure Facebook's one of the most frequently visited sites, certainly mobile as well as desktop every day. So I think there's plenty of opportunity sort of in that social space where dealers are going to be able to do a much better job moving forward of promoting themselves, as well as just search and some of the basics that many dealers, quite frankly, are already doing. But to me, the stat that sort of stuck out with me was the 10% on Facebook. Seems like that's plenty of opportunity left there.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. And Brian, what are the best metrics to use when looking at your online performance?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think there's a couple of key things to look at as we talked about, SRPs and VDPs, and what we track is the conversion. So how good of a job are you doing in terms of having your VIN be clicked on out of those 25 search results that come back. And sort of a guidepost is that in new cars, it's usually in the 0.8 to 0.9% range, so about 9/10 of 1%. And dealers that are doing a really good job are up around 2.5%. I think a couple of the examples I showed today were actually just extraordinary examples of 9-10% plus. But if you're performing sort of in the 1% range, you're at average, up around 2%, you're doing a much better job. I think the other key metric that I would be looking at if I owned a car dealership today was I read recently that the average dealer in 2017 is actually spending $700 a car in new vehicle advertising, which is actually up $100 from last year. It was $600. And what we're finding is that many of our clients that are doing a good job of effectively merchandising, stocking the most desirable vehicles, pricing them appropriately, are realizing the benefit of turning their inventory much, much faster than average. But then one of the other benefits is they're able to spend closer to $200 a car in advertising versus the sort of industry average right now, $700 a car. So I think, one last point I'll make on that is today's new car margins, as most of you know, are, very, very skinny. And so we're sort of in an environment where it's very, very difficult to make money on the front end of new vehicles. I think it's going to become increasingly important that we pay closer attention to how effective we are with that advertising investment and making sure that we're getting the best return on that dollars that we can.
Well, thank you. And like I stated, if you guys come up with any questions, Brian will be available for you at any time today and tomorrow. Give him a call. His cell phone is 770-856-8078. You can reach him as well on his email at brian.finkelmeyer@bauto.com. It's on the screen. And thank you so much for attending today's webinar, and thank you to Brian and Bauto for some great content. To view this webinar on demand and feature digital dealer webinars, please visit digitaldealer.com/webinars. Thank you and have a great day.